This is Bill Miles, and welcome to the Chamber's Teletown Hall. Certainly hope everyone had a good, safe, long weekend, and we're delighted to be back with you today, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to mention that on your screen there, you'll see a chat box, and to go ahead and get some questions in the queue. So we'll have those ready to go for our speakers this morning. Coming off a busy Memorial Day weekend, we thought it'd be helpful to offer some big picture insight into what's happening in the world of travel. And to give us that update, we have a friend and certainly a special guest with us this morning. He's the man Travel Weekly named one of the most influential people in travel, along with Bill Marriott and Richard Branson, some pretty heavy hitters. He's the travel editor for CBS News and frequently seen on CBS This Morning and the CBS Evening News. He's a multi-Emmy Award-winning journalist and best-selling author of The Travel Detective. And if that's not enough, he also hosts his own nationally syndicated radio show, Peter Greenberg Worldwide. He's the consummate travel insider and America's most honored and respected frontline travel news journalist. But before I invite Peter to speak this morning, let's take a look at what he had to say about the current state of travel during last week's broadcast of CBS Morning.
Most years, Memorial Day weekend launches the summer travel season. So what about this season? Here's CBS News travel editor, Peter Greenberg.
It's kind of jarring, isn't it? 400 passenger planes that'd normally be zipping through the skies are now parked in the California desert, row after row, with thousands more grounded elsewhere. Last year, the AAA said 43 million Americans went somewhere weekend. This year, the AAA isn't even making a guess as to how many people will hit the road.
You need to make your way from the valley to the west side wide open.
But they're expecting it to be an all-time low. Travel will bounce back, but for now, it's just inching back, and your experience won't be nearly the same. Let's start with your hotel. Travelers who check back in will have a much different stay, says Hilton CEO Chris Nassetta.
Here's your experience, Peter. Close your eyes and get ready. So you'll go to your room, but with your digital key, you won't have to touch anything other than your phone. You'll open your room with your phone.
And the room you open will have been cleaned like never before. Masked housekeepers will pay special attention to things like light switches and TV remotes. And when they're done, they'll put a seal on the door.
When a housekeeper is done cleaning the room, we will seal it, and you will be the first one in it, and we will not come in it until you leave or until you ask us to come back in it.
And now to the skies.
In order to promote social distancing, we will be conducting general boarding from the rear of the aircraft.
Air travel has dropped by as much as 90%. United Airlines is now flying fewer passengers per day than it has pilots.
Hand sanitizer?
But for those who are flying, the experience is different, and not necessarily in a good way. Food service aboard is mostly gone, and if you gotta go, one European airline, Ryanair, is making passengers raise their hands for permission to use the lavatory. That's not the case for U.S. carriers, yet. But there's an entirely new disinfecting program.
The plane will have been thoroughly cleaned prior to me getting on, and then we're not going to be mixing salad at my seat, are we?
Importantly, my seat, which may be more of a concern for many.
Oscar Munoz is executive chairman of United.
I'm assuming no more pillows on the planes for a while, no more blankets on the planes for a while.
Yeah, things of that nature, right? You saw that after 9/11, right? We took out cutlery, and then people, things eventually come back. I think once again, in this particular case, once a vaccine is discovered, hopefully, sort of the nervousness sort of dissipates and we can get back to something that's back to the old normal, but things will definitely change.
Like other airlines, United already has systems in place to make flying safer. Better cleaning of seat backs and tray tables, and things like electrostatic sprayers to disinfect every nook and cranny.
Please try the exercise of social distancing. Thank you.
But social distancing is pretty much impossible on a plane. And United was called out a few weeks ago when a passenger tweeted a photo of a packed flight.
Claiming that, my God, that there's no social distancing at all. What have you done about that?
We are going to let you know if you're flying on us a day or two in advance. Hey, by the way, Peter, the flight that you're on seems to be over X% full, 65, 70%. We'll figure out a number. If you're uncomfortable with that, there's a flight leaving 3 hours later that is, has really a lot of capacity. And so if you're uncomfortable and your plans allow that flexibility, so that's what we've sort of pivoted to ensure that you have that.
Besides being less crowded, your upcoming flight may also be cheaper.
Hi, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
You can find a lot of bargain flights right now, but since some airlines are losing $100 million a day, you can also expect fewer flights and more turbulence ahead.
For now, again, the operative term is to let's get through this crisis for a little bit of time and say a prayer or whatever it is that we do to make sure that not just our industry, but that the world writ large becomes a healthier place.
That when an entire industry is basically grounded, there's no place to go but up.
Peter, good morning, and thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing from you what lies ahead in travel. Thanks for being with us.
Can I speak?
Yes, it's all yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Great to be back, at least virtually, with you guys in South Carolina and seeing so many of my old friends there. I noticed Dwayne Parrish sitting there, he's the king of the take on the camera, but that's another story. He's laughing, I can see that. First and foremost, what you saw in that piece is not any surprise to any of you. COVID-19 has completely thrown the playbook out. It's redefined the role of states, of tourism boards, of hotels, of anybody who's a travel provider. It's redefined the role of many journalists, not me, so to speak, because I really cover the process more than I ever cover, beautiful beaches. But the bottom line is, it's changed the way we look at travel. It has not changed the way we want to travel or we need to travel. And so for destinations in South Carolina, you benefit for being, in many cases, a drive-to destination as travel starts, as I said, to inch back as opposed to bounce back. People will be taking more road trips. RV sales and rentals are already starting to spike. People want to be able to stay with their families because remember, we've gone from FOMO, fear of missing out, to FOGO, fear of going out. If we go back to 9/11, right after that period of time, everybody was terrified of flying over large bodies of water to go to anywhere because of fears of terrorism, getting their plane hijacked. Today, they're just afraid of going out, even crossing the street. We're dealing with some real deep-seated emotional fear here, not just on a local or regional level, we're dealing with it on a global level. So when you have this perfect storm, if you will, of outrageously high unemployment, economic crisis, fear of something that we have not dealt with yet, there's no widespread testing or a vaccine, we have to be real about what we're going to be able to do over the next, not 3 months or 6 months, but over the next 3 years. And that's really changing everything. Lysol has become the new luxury, if you will. It's thrown out your basic playbook in terms of how you market yourself and how you deal with the media. No one really cares anymore about, for the marketing folks watching, throw all those pictures of beautiful beaches out. The brochures can be burned. They have no credibility anymore because people aren't even focused on it. They, short of changing your names to the hazmat in the short term, people want what? They want a security blanket. Now, after 9/11, they wanted a security blanket. That's what brought us the TSA. And we can discuss the TSA's pros and cons forever. But that's how the TSA started. The security blanket today is different because what we want today is not one-dimensional. Everybody wants a guarantee, right? Businesses want a guarantee before they send their employees on a trip. The employees want a guarantee before they go. And state, local, and foreign governments want a guarantee before they want you even to show up. And again, in the absence of widespread testing and a vaccine, what do you show to say that I'm not going to be frothing at the mouth or glowing in the dark if I show up in Hilton Head tomorrow? There is no place to do that right now. And so in the absence of that, we have to just focus on process and not product. Meaning, what we just saw in the piece I did for CBS Sunday Morning. I want to know that before I get there, my room has been, the FBI's been there. I mean, the CDC's been there. Now that's all short term, because nobody right now is caring about the thread counts on the sheets. So, right? They just want to know that it's going to be okay. And they're not going to travel great distances to find out. They're going to test the water. And that's where, being in the 48 continental United States, you're in the driver's seat, because that's where they're going to test it out. So I remember a couple of years ago when I landed in Panama, of all places, before I even got to customs and immigration, there was a person there handing me a piece of paper. And I figured, oh, another form to fill out. It wasn't. What they did, and this is 5 years ago, is they understood fear. And so what they handed me was a document that said, as long as I was in Panama for the next 3 weeks, my health insurance was provided for, my medical evacuation insurance was provided for, and I would have no worries about getting medical care while I was there. That's a big deal. And that was government funded. Now, the interesting thing was, how often was that used? Hardly ever. But people came back every time realizing, okay, they've got this, I'm covered. You really need to anticipate this. And for the government folks listening this morning, the private sector may have to lead the way, because everybody's waiting for some leadership here from a federal point of view. And not to get political, and I won't, I haven't seen the leadership. So everybody, we are no longer the United States of America. We are the individual states of America, and everybody's going to have their own different protocols. And what's worse is that big bad animal called reciprocity. I mean, look, I'm in New York, one of the hot spots, right? I've been bunkered in here for the last 10 weeks. I'm about as close to becoming a barricaded suspect as you can get. And remember, this is the longest period of time I've ever spent in one location since I'm 17 years of age. So I understand the need to get out. But wait a minute, I'm in a hot spot. Do the people in Oklahoma want me to show up? Or if I'm a meat packer in South Dakota, do I want anybody showing up in New York? And all you need is one state to make that kind of determination, and other states will reciprocate. So I could see, in a situation of fear, state troopers at borders stopping license plates of any car that doesn't say their state on it. We've seen some examples of that early on in this, in Florida and also in New York, maybe even in New Jersey. And we're going to see bubbles, right? We're seeing that overseas, where certain locations in Eastern Europe are bonding together to say, okay, travel is okay within this region. Australia and New Zealand, travel's okay within this region. We could be doing it in the Southeast as well. But we have to be prepared for that. But what transcends all of that is you're going to have to deal with the fear, and to give people the guarantee that they need. Because the other thing that's rearing its ugly head, and I don't want to short shrift it, is we're coming up on an intersection of a perfect storm economically. Unemployment this week will exceed 40 million people, and that's just the people that have recorded it. It's more than that. We all know that it's the highest percentage in travel and tourism. That's number one. Number two, we're coming up with an intersection where state budgets will run out of unemployment funding in the next 5 or 6 weeks. What's going to happen then? Then there's revolving credit. We're dealing with massive defaults and payments of credit card companies. And a number of the credit card companies and the banks can withstand that for a while because they've made so much money in previous years on interest. But they are, after all, banks, and they're going to want to limit their exposure. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to either lower credit lines for even some of their best customers, or in many cases, freeze them or deny cards altogether. So when we're ready to travel, how are we going to pay for it? We may need to see a completely new financial model of how the travel industry self-finances, like the old layaway plan, where cruise lines will say, it'll cost you $100 to take the cruise and you can pay it off the balance over the next 18 months through their financial model or financial vehicle, and not depend on credit cards. We may see that in the hotel industry. We may see that in the airline business. There are already some models in place, but they haven't really been utilized to a great extent because credit cards are so easy. Well, they're not going to be so easy for a while now. So all of this has to be taken into account. Now, last but not least, because I know my time is short, you've got to throw one more thing out of the playbook. And it's something that you were almost not disinclined to do because it's worked so well in the past. You cannot discount your way out of this time. This is not about saying, here's a $19 hotel room. I'll give you an example. You know what the airfare was last week from Fort Lauderdale to Los Angeles? Anyone want to take a guess? It was $12.89, and $9 of that was taxes. Great. Are we all running to the airport in Fort Lauderdale now? We are not. There's still only 20 people on the plane. So it's not going to be about rate. It's going to be about security, trust, and value, and dealing with that guarantee. It's just, look, you may want to be able to do three nights, get a fourth night free. Maybe that's an idea. But in terms of discounting the rate, it's not going to drive traffic. People are not doing that. And you saw in the piece about blocking those center seats. Let's get real. When it's very easy for an airline to say, we're going to block all the center seats between now and June. Well, it's easy to say that when you only have 12 guys on a plane and 8 of them are named Vern. I mean, it's not going to work. When June 30th rolls around, those seats are coming back and you're going to be stuck in there next to the 2 sumo wrestlers. Get real. All right. So that's going to happen. It's basic airline economics. And the same thing's going to happen in terms of the hygiene protocols, right? So again, you can't discount your way out of this. You're going to have to communicate in a different way with trusted individuals. And with all due respect to my good friend Dwayne, I'm not just singling him out today, but I am going to single you out now, Dwayne. The last person, and don't take this personally, he's my friend, but the last person I want to hear from as a journalist is Dwayne. I'm expecting Dwayne to tell me everything's great. I need to hear from trusted travelers. It's viral, it's word of mouth. I mean, some of us may remember the old commercials, 9 out of 10 doctors prefer Bayer. Well, I want to see what 9 out of 10 doctors prefer in terms of a hotel. I want to see what 9 out of 10 healthcare professionals prefer on a cruise line. I mean, I need to hear from people who are frontline people who can come back and say, I'm okay, and you'll be okay too. So you're going to need to figure out who's going to tell your story, how you're going to tell your story, and how you're going to avoid the temptation to try to discount your way out of this. So that's my report for Wednesday, the 27th of May. I know my time was short. If there's questions, I'll be glad to answer them. And if anybody can figure out a way to get me out of New York right now, I'm open to hear that too.
Well, thank you, Peter. We're delighted to have you with us this morning. And you talked a little bit about security and trust and the private sector leading the way. And our community in Bluffton and on Hilton Head Island took the lead in developing a path forward readiness plan and looking at 9 different segments of business and providing a plan to make sure all those businesses are taking the proper safety precautions and operating in a manner that is safe and that guests can trust. So we're glad to hear you say that, and the private sector here is leading the way. A couple of questions for you. The first one comes in. We have a question from Cooper, and Cooper is asking, does COVID-19 impact and ultimately change the sharing economy, or does it make it stronger?
I think in the long term, it actually makes it stronger, and I'll tell you why. Where would you rather stay right now? In a 600-room convention hotel with a crowded lobby and a packed bar, or somebody's bedroom that's been cleaned and you're going to be there for 3 weeks? What you're going to see in the sharing economy in the short term are going to be people saying, if you want to stay in my Airbnb, you got to give me a 2-week commitment or a 3-week commitment because I can't turn the room fast enough. That's the problem. Who's did we ever think before who was in the room the night before when we checked into a hotel? Well, I know you thought about it, but you still stayed there. And did you wash your hands 15 times a day when you checked in? You didn't. But now we're thinking about that. And so that's going to be a consideration about the short and long term. It's incumbent upon the shared economy, whether it's Uber drivers or the Airbnb folks or the I'll get to that in a second. But those two, especially as examples, it's incumbent upon them to then communicate what they've done before you've ever gotten there so that you'll go in the first place. But I do think they have a future here.
Next question, Peter, comes from Deborah. With the challenges many travelers experience with Airbnb and like platforms, will we see consumers move away from big booking platforms and turn to local management companies?
Well, don't get me started. The OTAs are basically, I'm at war with them right now. You know why? Because all of my listeners on my radio show and all of my viewers on television are at war with them because they turned out not to be travel agents at all. They tried to take no responsibility for what happened here when people tried to get a refund or tried to talk to a human being, let alone that. So they've got some explaining to do, not only to the U.S. Department of Transportation, but to me. And the lesson learned is if you're looking at travel as just a commodity, that $59 flight on Southwest from LaGuardia to Midway Airport in Chicago, and you're going to do that for the rest of your life, go to a kiosk, go online, go with God. But when something goes wrong, that's what determines the real service providers. And the OTAs did not step up to the plate, and they're suffering because of it, and they should suffer because of it until they get their act together. How's that for not mincing words?
as always. Next question: how does fear help anyone but the press and lawyers? I know you love that question.
Oh, I'll eat that for lunch. Look, fear is not started by me. How many people have come up to me in the last 6 weeks, unsolicited, saying, you couldn't pay me to go on a cruise? I didn't even ask them. The point is, the fear is everywhere because it's not local and regional. You know, when we talked about Ebola, when we talked about SARS, and all those other outbreaks over the last 20 years, it was somewhere else. It was somebody else's problem. This hits home quite frequently and quite intensely. I've lost a number of friends and some close friends as well. I mean, the woman who officiated at my marriage last year died. I mean, this is, and she worked with me at CBS. So you're not dealing with something that's just cavalier here or something that's fomented by the press or the lawyers. But I'll get to the lawyers in a second. Let's first talk about the press. My job here is not to convince you of anything. My job is to give you information that you can then make some intelligent decisions about the process of travel. And right now, the process of travel has been not only interrupted, it's been messed up, okay? And it's going to stay that way for a while, even though it will inch back. As far as the lawyers are concerned, let's go back to my original comment about people wanting guarantees. Welcome to the brave new world of waivers and liability. How many people have had that discussion already who are watching me right now? You all have, if you're a travel provider, even at the state level. So the point is this: we need to educate the lawyers here about what constitutes acceptable response. If I want to go to a hair salon and I've got to sign a waiver, right? Well, what's going to happen soon is the waiver I'm going to want them to sign. And next thing you know, we're in litigation hell, right? The biggest problem that we have now about lawyers is the lawyers of the travel providers who didn't want to give refunds when they were required to do it. So what you're going to see now is a parade of small claims court actions in which every plaintiff is going to prevail. You want to know why? Because all the small claims court judges have been trying to get their refunds too and couldn't get them. It's going to be a parade of victories there. But what message is that sending out? It's that you can't trust and you're afraid. Two of the messages you do not want to have happen from this moment forward. So you have to deal with, how do we deal with the trust issue and how do we deal with the fear issue? And it has nothing to do with the press. It's like, if I'm reporting a fire, don't blame me because the house is on fire.
Peter, last question comes to us from Kay. And Kay is asking you to speak a little bit about hotel mergers, acquisitions post COVID-19, and how the brands survive.
Well, I'm not worried about brands surviving. I'm worried about owners surviving. And most Americans don't realize, you guys do, that Hilton and Marriott and Intercontinental, they're management companies. They don't own most of their hotels. Their equity positions are ridiculously low, right? Of the 6,000 hotels Hilton manages, they might have equity in 8 of them. I mean, that's a ridiculous percentage, but that's a fact. And so the problem here is not about whether Marriott or Hilton or Hyatt will survive. The problem here is, will their owners survive if they can't maintain debt service? And you're going to start seeing that start to collapse when the owners can't make their mortgage payments, and all of a sudden hotels just get closed, no matter what flag they're having, because that's the situation. If you're an owner of a really big box convention and meeting hotel, you got a problem right now for the rest of this year and into the middle of next year. We all know how long conventions and meetings are booked in advance, and that's not happening right now. And if it is, it's a temporary booking. It's a contingent booking. So you may, in terms of mergers, there's not much left to merge, right? Right now, if you're sitting in the boardroom of Hyatt or Wyndham or maybe Best Western, you're trying to figure out, do you want to buy or do you want to be bought? But they were having those discussions before the pandemic. The real issue here is how many of the owners will survive. And that's a question I can't answer right now, but it doesn't look, for the moment, very good.
Peter, it's always a delight to be with you and hear your thoughts. I'm sure our listeners enjoyed today. And stay safe, and thank you for being with us this morning.
If I could just say one more thing, and that is, if anybody has any additional questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Here's my email. It's peter@petergreenberg.com, and I hope to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
We're We're going to transition now to back to South Carolina, where we're going to hear from Dwayne Parrish, our Director of South Carolina Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. Dwayne.
Thank you, Bill. Peter, it's always insightful listening to you. You're a tough act to follow, but such a pleasure. And I appreciate you coming on today as well from South Carolina. Always good to hear your insights. Kind of take a look through where we are today and where we go from here on a few things. So as of yesterday, there are now 84 hotels in the state that are closed. That is down from a high of 575, which was back in mid-April. Hotel occupancy for the month of April was 26.4% for South Carolina, compared to 25% for the Southeast and 24.5% for the United States. And in relation to what Peter said about short-term rentals, AirDNA occupancy, which is that is the company that represents most short-term rentals like HomeAway, Airbnb, and the like, their occupancy was 53%, which was practically double what it was for hotels. Going back to what Peter said, the short-term rentals have fared much better than hotels during this time. I think for a variety of reasons, ones that Peter pointed out, as well as additional space, kitchen, and the like for people to sort of hunker down during that time, particularly during April. Moving forward into May, hotel occupancy for the week ending May 16 was 39% for South Carolina versus 34% for the Southeast and 32.4% for the U.S. One of the things that has become apparent, at least in our state, is there appears to be a growing divide between weekend occupancy, which has surged well ahead of weekday occupancy. This indicates a lag in the return of the corporate traveler. I think Peter talked a little bit about liability. I think some corporations are not comfortable having their employees travel at this time, not to mention the financial decision of whether they spend the money on corporate travel. So I think those certainly seem to be in play, at least at this point. One of the things that this past weekend did become apparent for us, we did fare well with Memorial Day weekend. While numbers of occupancy were below normal of what it would normally be, anecdotal occupancy for the past weekend was between 75 and 90% along the coast. Again, this is below normal levels of 95 to 100%, but if you'd asked me 3 weeks ago, I didn't think we'd be anywhere close to 75%. So we have come in a relatively short period of time. The rest of the state, sort of west of I-95, occupancy was in the 45 to 50% range. Again, well below normal levels, but slightly above where it had been in previous weeks. State parks had a very busy weekend once again. We have returned our regular capacity numbers as well as normal operating hours, but we still had 13 parks that reached capacity on Saturday, 11 parks that reached capacity on Sunday. We have our cabin occupancy and campground and cabin occupancy for the weekend was over 90%, which is near normal levels for Memorial Day weekend. As you remember, state parks opened May 1st, and we started taking reservations there on May 12th. They seem to have sort of caught up in regard to campground and cabin occupancy from that perspective. You may also remember Governor McMaster allowed attractions to open last Friday with recommended guidelines in place to come. I've also heard very good anecdotal reports of visitation at the different attractions throughout the weekend. Entertainment venues are still closed, such as bowling alleys, theaters, both movie theaters and live production theaters, nightclubs, concert venues, and racetracks. I would look for guidance to come out on those later this week. So the state of South Carolina, between the Department of Agriculture, PRT, our agency, and the South Carolina Restaurant Lodging Association currently have a 30-second spot called Drumroll, which which indicates the reopening of South Carolina restaurants. Basically saying we are open. Hopefully some of you have seen that. It's playing at TV stations throughout South Carolina, as well as border states along Savannah, Augusta, and Charlotte. Our call to action advertising starts on June 1st, this coming Monday. Media plan links have been sent out to Bill. He has copies of has links to some of those ads or spots that we're running. That would take place and gear up to go live June 1st. And we typically, as Peter pointed out, we're in the drive market. That's in that 350-mile radius around South Carolina. Goes all out as far as Ohio, which is still kind of a drive market for us. But I anticipate that will help, particularly in that leisure time period and weekends, help drive some business to the state. The Volvo Car Open team announced this past weekend the Volvo Car Stadium in Charleston will host a week-long women's tennis tournament from June 22nd to June 28th. This will be 27 hours of live tennis on the Tennis Channel, and we'll start the Monday after the completion date of the RBC Heritage, which is June 21st. I think that will give us our third large event in regard to sort of being at the forefront of the reemergence of sports, starting with the Darlington race and the NASCAR race in Darlington, followed by the RBC Heritage on June 18th through the 21st, and then followed by the first WTA Women's Tennis Association event that will start on June 22nd. Bill, pending any questions, that concludes my report. And then once again, it was a pleasure to hear from Peter. And he's a tough act to follow, but I appreciate him being on.
Thank you, Dwayne. A question from Jim is asking, does the state track timeshare usage? And if so, where does it stand today versus normal averages?
We don't track timeshares per se. Some may be second homes, some may be individual home owns that have shared rooms or private rooms or whole house rentals, if you will. When I mentioned AirDNA earlier, that's a combination of Airbnb, VRBO, which is vacation rental by owner, VRBO.com, HomeAway.com, and several other sites. Their occupancy, as I mentioned, at least for the month of April, was about double what hotels were. They have certainly fared better. Now, some of those are timeshares, some are not. And timeshares can be structured many different ways, but we don't track them specifically.
All right, Dwayne, thank you. And thank you again for being with us. Not many more days till I think about 20 days or so until the RBC Heritage. And we're looking forward to seeing Hilton Head Island shine on CBS.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. We're going to transition now locally and to talk with Michael Soshin. Michael's the GM at the Westin Hilton Head Island Resort and Spa, and we thought it might be interesting for you to hear a perspective this morning from a hotel GM and how Memorial Day weekend went, and some of the unique things that the Westin is doing here on Hilton Head Island. Michael, welcome.
Good morning, Bill. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, I'd like to begin by saying a huge thank you, Bill, to you and your team on behalf of the entire lodging community for the incredible support you've given us over this unique time. You've been there to support us every step of the way with every new challenge we face. So again, we thank you. But the great news that I have to share is that business has definitely returned to the hotels on Hilton Head Island, specifically in the leisure transient market. Transient leisure demand has been exceptionally strong over the past 3 weeks and continues to grow. We're seeing very strong volume, especially in the 2-week window, but now well into the summer months. The demand has been so strong, as a matter of fact, that we decided at our resort specifically to cap our occupancy at around 80% for the past few weekends, or actually for the past few weeks, just to ensure we would be able to safely manage social distancing, as well as pool and deck capacities. And I know that some other resorts on the island have done the same. In addition, even though those restrictions were lessened last week on pool capacities, we still decided to rope off our pools to a single entry exit point and had a robust loss prevention staff presence on our pool decks just to ensure that social distancing was maintained over the holiday weekend. And we felt those plans were very successful and definitely appreciated by our guests. One of the biggest challenges, though, that we've encountered is staffing our hotels fast enough to meet the demand. But that seems to get better every week. And I know for our resorts specifically, we're in a good place now, but I've heard similar stories from other lodging products on the island. The next big challenge, as you've heard Peter mention, is group business. Groups are still hesitant to meet and hold events, but we'll begin to host some initial small events starting in June. And I believe other hotels in the market are doing the same. We have our new event protocols in place so that we can comfortably execute events in a safe manner. Our meeting capacities, though, will be greatly reduced to ensure that we can safely social distance, and food and beverage presentations and executions will certainly look different as well moving forward. We're still seeing short-term cancellations as groups decide when will be the appropriate time to begin hosting meetings again. And I think our biggest test will come in the fall when we have a good amount of group business still on the books. But overall, we feel very, very fortunate to be one of the first markets to see business return to their hotels. Industry data shows that the drive market resort properties near the ocean are seeing the sharpest return to leisure business. And as you heard some of the other occupancy shared by, I think, both Peter and Dwayne, we feel very fortunate here on the island to see this transient demand come back so quickly. So it's great to see Hilton Head Island sort of lead the way in this slow recovery that it's going to be for the lodging industry. And that's it from the lodging sector, Bill, but if there's any questions, I'll certainly take them.
Michael, thank you. And also want to say thank you for worrying about that guest experience and what you're doing there at the Westin and capping occupancy to making sure that you're providing that and doing all things right. So thanks for sharing a great report with us this morning. We appreciate what you're doing, and we look forward to, again, better times ahead.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. We know that the drive markets are starting to bounce back a little bit, but we also thought that it was important to look a little bit at air travel. And while Peter touched on that some, I wanted to welcome Greg Kelly. Greg's the director of the Savannah Hilton Head International Airport. Welcome him to the call this morning to talk about some of the things that the airport is doing and experiencing and what type of loads they're starting to see. Greg Kelly, welcome to the call.
Hey, Bill, good morning.
Good morning.
We had a real good Memorial Day week here, relatively speaking, of course. We had a pretty good sized spike driven by leisure travel, pickup in leisure travel, specific to Allegiant and American Airlines. The national average and the TSA numbers showed about 85% off from the previous, this time the previous year. We were 75 to 80% off, so we were a good bit above average in terms of passenger counts for the country. To put that in real numbers, our normal passenger counts for this time of the year would be about 4,500. We were between 1,000 and 1,200 a day over the Memorial Day week. You know, and anecdotally speaking, we took a good look at what the passenger dynamic was looking like around the terminal building, just to get a feel for, you know, the fear factor that Peter was talking about. And we found that most people were upbeat and relaxed. There wasn't a lot of stress or tension. They were just glad to be traveling in a somewhat normal environment. And we saw a good bit of flow from Ohio, Indianapolis, Chicago, and Newark coming in and going out. A little more specifics with regard to what we're doing here, and I'm sure Hilton Head Airport's in the same boat. We're still following the South Carolina and Georgia governor's guidelines for opening facilities. These include surge cleaning, distancing markers, signage, plexiglass shields, hand sanitizer stations, face coverings, and for frontline employees. And we're right now, we're not, there's not any temperature checks going on at this time, although TSA is looking at a pilot program. I think that's still some time off here. One airline said they would be doing temperature checks. Frontier Airlines indicated they would, but right now they're not flying. Airlines are requiring face coverings, but they're not enforcing it. So what we're seeing is a lot of people carrying the face coverings, but not actually wearing them. Uber and Lyft say they're requiring face coverings, but again, when we went out and took a look at what was really going on, the drivers aren't wearing face coverings, and they're not having the passengers wear face coverings for the most part. In the terminal building, you know, we have limited restaurants and retail right now, but we're looking at increasing that as our passenger counts increase. We're about 85% in terms of the number of seats that we had for May, and June looks about the same. But July is looking pretty good, and the airlines are saying there's some pretty good numbers in terms of bookings in July. So we would expect to see a significant increase in July. We do encourage anybody that's traveling by air to keep checking frequently with the airline as things continue to change. We've made it a priority to do everything we can to hold on to the air service that we've had and make sure it comes back. And our focus in particular is on JetBlue, making sure that we do not lose JetBlue. So what we need to do there is invest heavily in the markets that JetBlue serves, and also in some of the markets that Allegiant serves. Towards that end, and Bill, I don't know if you've shared this previously, but towards that end, we're partnering with the Hilton Head Chamber and to invest in a surge marketing campaign in the amount of $200,000 for phase one to target the JetBlue markets and certain Allegiant markets and some of our core markets. And we're prepared to invest more to make sure that we're positioned well in terms of how the airlines see the demand here relative to other airports, because in October, that's when they're going to start making some serious decisions, because that's when they come out from under the CARES Act restrictions in terms of markets they serve. So we need to position ourselves very strongly to make sure that they look at our region and our market, the Hilton Head, Savannah, Gold Miles market, very favorably. And Bill, that concludes my update.
Thank you very much, Greg. We do have a question that comes to you from Andrew, and Andrew is asking, as far as the terminal, does the terminal look different on the inside post COVID-19?
The things that you'll see differently again would be markings on the floor and signage. You see some increased spacing in the queue areas at the airline check-in and also at the TSA. The queue lines have been elongated to allow for proper distancing. What's interesting there is, again, anecdotally watching how people act, people are self-distancing, and that's a good sign. So they're not necessarily looking for queues. They're doing self-distancing in the waiting areas and the TSA check-in and the airline check-in and down in bag claim as well. So you don't see a whole lot different other than some markings and signage here, Andrew. Thank you for asking.
Greg, thank you for being with us this morning. Also, thank you for being a great marketing partner with us. And we look forward to, again, seeing brighter days ahead. As we transition this morning, we know that business is important, putting people in jobs, working, our neighbors, our friends, and receiving paychecks and feeding families. We also know that the health of our community is certainly very, very important. And we're watching that, monitoring it closely. And back again with us this morning is Dr. Michael Katka with DHEC. Dr. Katka, welcome back.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak as always. So we are reporting 1,369 new cases of COVID-19 in the state in the past week. This brings the total number of people confirmed to have the disease in South Carolina to 10,416. This includes 51 new cases in Buford County for a total of 342 cases in the county. The Hilton Head zip codes 29926 and 29928 had 2 additional cases for a total of 35 there. The Bluffton zip codes 29909 and 29910 had 28 additional cases, bringing the total to 95 there for those zip codes. Unfortunately, today we're also reporting 47 additional COVID-19 related deaths in the past week. This brings the total number of people who have passed away from the disease to 446. No additional deaths were reported in Buford County individuals. So as I mentioned last time, our goal was to test 2% of the population, or about 110,000 South Carolinians each month. And as of yesterday, we exceeded that goal for the month of May. So this increase in testing is important to keep in mind when I mention increases in the number of cases at the state, county, and zip code level. While we report 342 identified cases in Buford County, our estimated numbers are actually over 2,000 cases for the county. So a lot of this testing is actually identifying cases that were previously not being identified. So many are wondering with the recent reopenings of some businesses if this has had an impact on the number of cases. So this is still kind of difficult to assess because we're still in the early stages and we have that incubation period, which is the time between someone is exposed to the time that they have symptoms, which can be up to a week or even more in some cases, which causes a little bit of delay in seeing the effects of different changes. So DHEC is continuing to look into other data metrics that will help us determine where the new hotspots are for cases. So currently we use the percent positive of tests for the state, which has consistently stayed below 10%. This is indicative of more widespread testing being done. So as we're seeing an increase in cases, we're also seeing an increase in testing each day. So DHEC will be well prepared to respond to new cases with easier availability of testing and enhanced contact tracing, as I covered in some of the previous briefings on this call. We've seen examples in other countries how this approach of testing and enhanced contact tracing can be effective at controlling the spread of COVID-19. It is very important, even as we move to more reopening and more normal operations, that everyone continue to practice precautions such as social distancing and wearing cloth masks when in some public situations. This not only ensures the health and safety of ourselves and our neighbors, which of course is the most important part, but ensures that we can continue to keep moving forward with reopening. So for the latest updates on COVID-19, you can visit our website, scdhec.gov/COVID-19. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them now.
Dr. Katka, thank you for being with us again this morning. We had one question for you and you on top of it and answered that one for us. So again, thanks for being with us this morning.
No problem. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We're going to transition now to John O'Toole, and John's the Executive Director of the Buford County Economic Development Group. And there's a four-letter word that certainly John and I share, and one of our favorite words, and that's jobs, J-O-B-S. And so I thought a perfect way to conclude our call this morning is to look at some of the successes that John and his organization are having with the economic development recruitment. John, welcome on.
Bill, thanks a lot. And I'd like to thank you and your team for the great work you've done throughout the COVID event and continue to do. I hope everyone on the call can see the slides that I'll run through. You know, there's obviously some hardship stories that have arisen for businesses out of COVID-19. But I hope as we end today's call, I give some cause for optimism. Our organization was stood up in 2017 to diversify the economy, and I'll speak to that right now. Our marketing folks have arrived at a tagline, good for your business, good for your soul. And it's a great fit for the work that your organization and the folks on the call are doing in the area of hospitality and tourism. We find that 60% of our leads come from somebody who either has vacationed here, has visited here, has a part-time home. So 60% of our leads are organically derived from the work that you're doing. In terms of jobs and investment, we're inching up. At the end of June, we'll have completed 2 years in business, and we just surpassed the $100 million mark in terms of projects that myself and Charlie Stone at the Buford County Economic Development Corporation and many of our partners have had the pleasure to work with. Better than 700 jobs, both attracted and retained. And we take great pride in the impact that has on people's lives with a average annual compensation over $48,000. During this time, we've seen over 600,000 square feet be absorbed or created to house those projects. And I won't go through all of those numbers right now, and I'll try to be fairly quick. I know I'm in the cleanup spot. Over the next 7 years, work done by our friends at USCB and Clemson ran our work through an economic model, have a $1.7 billion output in the region, $334 million in wages. And bottom line is we're going through these tough times and municipalities, the county, trying to wrestle with budgeting over $11 million in county and municipal revenues. So for the investment. We think it's paying off. During COVID-19, again, the Chamber has done excellent work, and have been great to collaborate and coordinate with. We try not to make too much noise. There was a lot of inputs coming at business and industry, and we think that we filled a role without being distracting to the good work that the bankers were doing, and again, the Chamber was doing. We've also networked with companies pivoting, and I'll go over a few of these if you don't mind. In the upper left, a company out of Buford, resident of Bluffton, along with another Bluffton resident, Dust Solutions and Global Infection Control Consultants teamed together to come up with a product, that where they could fog a police cruiser, an ambulance, a fire truck, or a hotel room for that matter, in about 20 to 30 seconds. And according to our friends at GICC, Global Infection Control Consultants, knocked down COVID in about 30 or 40 seconds. Harris Pillow transitioned to making masks and gowns. Our new friends from Burchurch Distillery, again working with the Chamber, created the help program and providing meals to needy families, and also helping restaurants. Sarah Light, right on Hilton Head, a company that creates a hydration product for the military, was able to transition and get that product into hotels and healthcare facilities to help people who were dealing with COVID. Map Tech out on Dillon Road on Hilton Head is doing some increased packaging projects with food companies, Dole Foods being one of them. So companies were able to pivot. We worked over these times, and I'll whip through these fairly quickly, but we try to keep our messaging up on social media through La Isla's publications on their YouTube channel, and trying to get some of the projects. You can see Synergy right on Hilton Head. We were able to get them on WHHI, and again, just trying to get the message out that Buford's open and interested in business. Prior to COVID-19, we spent a lot of time in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, and we've stayed in touch with the companies we met with up there that might be looking to expand in the Southeast with a snail mail and personal correspondence, which we think will make a difference. When we speak to economists, it's projected that a recession probably started on March 1st. It's hoped that it'll be short-lived. And a lot of the work that we're doing, we believe it's like turning the soil for projects that'll come out in time to see the resurgence in the U.S. economy. Our targets, I won't go through all of these, but we've done some additional focus groups, and we seem to be on the right track with our targeted industries, and wrapping up with supply chain for hospitality and tourism. Coming out of COVID, we think there's a lot of opportunity. You see on the right, there was an article published online with Site Selection Group indicating that our region would be less susceptible to disruption than even Savannah and Charleston, and it looked at metropolitan areas around the nation. So we're in good position to come back quick. Our government has been eager to come back, and even the Path Forward work done by the Chamber helps us do that in a responsible way. And we believe that there's going to be a real effort for reshoring and movement towards non-urbanism, people who are looking to do business in an area where it's good for their business, and again, good for their soul. Here's the punchline, and this is really, why I'm grateful to be on today's call. While we were in the midst of COVID-19, you'll see a list of companies listed to the left there. It amounts to over $69 million in projects where people could have easily taken their foot off the gas pedal and said, "Oh, we're not going to continue to work on that." But these companies are continuing to invest in Buford County, so we think the prospects are high. And amidst all of the confusion, concerns, we think that this is a cause for optimism. And I will say, as I ride my bicycle around Hilton Head and see all the out-of-state plates, I believe we're going to continue to be a destination because we are so desirable and because we get our messaging out very effectively. Strategic focus going forward is to work with the towns and the community to kind of optimize and recognize the new norms and take advantage of them, as well as continue to be an answer for regions of the country that are very concerned. But as I wrap up my comments today, and I'd be happy to answer questions, or folks are welcome to get in touch with me, I believe there's a lot of optimism. And again, thanks for having me on the call this morning. Thank you.
John, thank you, and congratulations to the fine work you and Charlie are doing. We're certainly appreciative of that, and also appreciate you being part of the Path Forward Readiness Plan and the input that you had with us on that. So thank you. As we move forward, looking at the Path Forward, we have close to 300 businesses now that have taken the pledge. If you haven't and you're interested, all you simply need to do is email pathforward.org, and you'll receive a rapid response back for that. Also want to mention that on June the 9th that we have our primary elections going on, and we have recently done a video candidate forum, a virtual forum, featuring two of our local races for State House District 123 and 118, and we'd encourage you to watch that. Thank you for joining us this morning. Again, we're delighted to have you with us. Hope you're finding the calls informative, and have a great rest of your week. Goodbye, everyone.